what I'm going to talk about today is expanding some of the presentation that Wayne from Oregon gave last year here at this conference, where basically was showing you how we use EHR to manage the animal health record within all the primate centers. This is an expansion of that. The goal of this presentation is how we have used LabKey to basically help 5 different primate centers expand the capabilities of EHR module to serve the needs of each individual primate center, and also how each primate center has contributed to developing more modules and more things that we can do within the LabKey platform. So there is 7 national primate research centers. All of the ones in italic are currently using LabKey. I'm from Wisconsin. Yerkes in Washington currently have another system, but some of their institutions do have implementations of LabKey. We are funded by the National Institutes of Health, at least Wisconsin, and I was checking this before a couple days ago. Wisconsin was the oldest one, oldest primate centers, but it has more than 50 years. It was established more than 50 years ago. And as you can see, all the primate centers are in different regions of the country. Each of them was designed as a research resource within the region. So studies or research projects that happen in Wisconsin, they're not limited only to the university. We have researchers from Miami. We have researchers from all over the country or the region that basically want to do studies in animals, and then we provide them that service. So more about the Wisconsin National Primate Research Center. As I mentioned, the host institution is the University of Wisconsin at Madison. We are located in 3 different locations. A couple of main buildings near the university campus, a secondary building at the medical school, and a quarantine building that is close to 20 miles away from the university. We house close to 2,000 non-human primates in all of these 3 locations. We also have 2 breeding colonies, one for rhesus and one for marmosets. So going more into how we ended up with LabKey, back in 2009, the government had ERA funding available. So Wisconsin, together with LabKey, basically submitted a grant, and we got funded to work on a project to basically expand the study module to serve the purpose of managing health information for non-human primates, and also add some of the research data that we were collecting. So together with LabKey, we expanded the study module and developed a specific EHR module. So what has happened with this, more than 10 years ago? So the goal was to develop a modern health record system to store information of non-human primates, and also expand the capability of allowing PIs and researchers at the primate center add research data into into LabKey. So the system went live right around 2011. That's when I joined the primate center. It was very interesting. The person who developed the system and made it go live was leaving and was joining LabKey, and he left me to take care of the system as he was leaving. It's very interesting. With no experience, well, we have survived. That's good news. So around 2012, Oregon, based on the success that we have had and some of the features that we have presented, decided also to implement their own version of LabKey. So both centers share a common module, the HR module, which is a very simple extension of the study module. But then some of the work that was done at Oregon each primate center allowed Wisconsin to maintain and add specific features that were of interest to us. And Oregon basically have different things or different columns that they will want to keep track in their own system. So somehow, LabKey helped us to reuse a lot of the code, but still have specific features that each primate center needed. After this, 3 other primate centers are in the process of developing their own versions of the EHR module, going back to that initial idea that we all share a common EHR module, and then there's extensions of that each primate center is using. So I don't have the dates, but I know Southwest, which are here, started right around 2014. California was 2015 or so, and Tulane started in 2016. So each primate center, every year, basically based on the success that both us and Oregon have had, said like, well, this seems like a good product. It's helping you do the work, and they decided to implement their own versions. So since 2015, we have met regularly with all primate centers. So thanks to the help of LabKey and some of their staff, Josh and Alice and other people, basically we met every other month remotely. So we use GoToMeeting. And one of the things that I particularly like about this meeting is basically listen to the other primate centers. What are they working on? What is their next milestones? How we can learn from other people the successes and the errors that they have committed when implementing LabKey. So, it's an hour-and-a-half meeting, which sometimes gets a little long, but it's good. It's a good time to see like, oh, look, Oregon is implementing this. I might be interested in looking at that code and using it in my own version. And also, since 2015, it started as a very informal meeting, but we have maintained this in-person meeting here during the LabKey conference, and I think Michael mentioned it. We had this meeting yesterday. And again, this is an expansion of our bi-monthly meeting. So now we'll go to the meat of the talk. So how do we do code sharing? How do we, each primate center has its own goals for what the system has to do. So we basically, I have identified 2 methods that we do, and we code share through this project merger. So the ones in bold are things that I'm going to talk. I have a couple of slides. The other ones are just other examples, but basically, as I mentioned, the center-specific VHR modules are things that LabKey has helped each center basically expand the capabilities of the study module. The billing module, it's kind of like the verse side where Oregon Primate Center developed a billing module when they were in the process of implementing the EHR. So we realized that it was something that we wanted, and it was working for them. So now we're currently in the process of having LabKey develop it for us. So, and the other one is center-specific development. So these are, Wisconsin and also Southwest has developed software and pieces of code that can interact with LabKey. And then we sort of informally share it with other centers. So last year, my unit started the idea of developing this PrimateID, which I will talk in a little bit. And also, just to give you an idea, each primate center has multiple units, but they also have this sort of collaborations. And that's how, this breeding cohort builder was something that the veterinarians have heard from their counterparts in Oregon and Southwest, saying that, oh, look, they have this very cool cohort builder, basically, piece of software that helped them determine groups of animals to be breeding groups. So they wanted to use it. So then through their interaction with their counterparts in the other primate centers, they basically tap me and say like, hey, can we start using this? So as I mentioned, the center-specific EHR modules, each center shares a common version of the EHR module. Each center extends that module and matches their specific needs. So the code mainly resides on LabKey SVN repository, which sometimes is a benefit, but sometimes is also very troublesome to some degree. where we forgot to like backport fixes that other people have found, which a lot of, I think it constantly help us between primate centers, because if I encountered a problem when I do an update, Oregon, chances are that Oregon will not encounter the same problem because LabKey and us will have identified it and fixed it. Sometimes that doesn't happen that well, but for the most part, we are aware of like, oh, by the way, yeah, this is a problem that we have seen before. Let me find how we fixed it, so that there's a lot of code reuse between primate centers. So one of the things is that the common module, the common EHR module, is shared between all primate centers. And it's pretty stable across LabKey versions. Any changes or additions to this module usually gets suggested by any one of the primate centers, basically discussed among us, and in LabKey will upload it and make it part of the common trunk, and it will go there forever. The center-specific modules are improving constantly. Like Southwest, also California, are in active development, so they are always changing and making new improvements to the system. And what is nice about that, and based on the meetings that we currently have, I can see what they're working on and see how I can make use of what they have developed in my own instance. So now, regarding the billing module. So this is something that Oregon developed. And basically, it's a way, so currently how we do it in Wisconsin, we have a legacy system that basically extracts all the data from LabKey, imports it into the financial legacy system, and basically creates invoices for our clients. So what Oregon had done is basically everything that happens to an animal basically gets a price tag, gets an amount that cost. If you want blood, if you want to extract blood from an animal, this has a cost. So all that information is already stored in our EHR module. And the billing module, and the basis of it is just adding monetary amounts so that we can easily create invoices from within LabKey. So during the last year or so, we contracted with LabKey so that we can generalize the module and make some modifications for our own use. The idea to generalize the module is so that when Southwest or when Tulane are interested in implementing this financial module, it will be easier for them to make the modifications that are specific for their center. So it will be a very similar model than the EHR module. Again, this is maintaining the LabKey as being a repository, and Wisconsin, we are in active development. We have to. The goal is to go live next year, and we think it's going to be a very great success based on what our counterparts in Oregon have experienced. And as I mentioned, other primate centers are already thinking about implementing the financial module. So this now I'll switch back to center-specific development that has been done by my unit at Wisconsin and also in Southwest. So the PrimateID, this is a unique identifier that the goal is that we will have a standard way to identifying any animal across all primate centers. So it is, we develop it as a standalone module that will, out of the box, will work with LabKey, but also since, as I mentioned before, Yerkes and Washington use another system, they can potentially, with some work, make it work with their own system. The code is maintained at Wisconsin. So we have our own GitHub repository that stores the PrimateID module. This is also something that we're planning to develop before the end of the year. And we're hoping that the other primate centers also will implement this module, together with the help with LabKey and their IT staff, they can enable and add this module to their own build system and have it deploy at their own facility. So there's nothing magical about this PrimateID, but basically it's a way that we are hoping to standardize how any animal is identified within all primate centers. So it's a 10 character long ID. The two first digits are a center-specific prefix that is configurable. So when you enable the module, you have to tell it WI, OR. Like we're hoping people will use the states two-character identification. It automatically creates 7 random characters and adds the last character is a checksum, just to make sure in case people will, or our staff will have to enter this ID manually, the checksum will make sure that, hey, you mistyped something. So we hope it will work. For a lot of the times, people one of the holdups is that we're trying to define a way that we can include it when people are exporting data. So if I want to export a cohort of animals, I say export to Excel, LabKey will automatically include it as a column. Whenever you see an export for publish or export for sharing, it will automatically include this column. We'll look at the mapping between the institution animal ID and map it to this primate ID. The breeding cohort, this was something developed by one of the people out over at Southwest together with help, and they worked closely with Oregon. So this is this system is using the primate demographic information that is stored within the HR module to establish breeding cohorts. So some of the other primate center, in our primate center, are starting to make pens or groups of animals that will live well together. And in those cases, you need to know how each of the 10 or 15 animals are related to each other. So this will help you determine, yeah, this is a good group, and there's not going to be problems if they start breeding. So this is an interesting development that is basically is an RStudio application that it's capable of pulling data out of LabKey. So it doesn't live within LabKey, but a user can install it in their own computer and automatically pull data from LabKey and build those cohorts. And also is maintained at a GitHub repository. So this is one of the things that, so with that all being said, the biggest question that always gets to my mind is how we make all these changes in a production server. We at the Primate Center, as Wayne mentioned last year, LabKey is kind of like our operating system. People come at 6 in the morning, they pull every treatment that they need to do to the animals, and if LabKey is not working, guess what? I get a phone call. And I don't like to be woken up at 6 in the morning saying that the system is down. So every time we make an update, so there's two things that we have to evaluate. But is the time that it takes to make sure everything works worth the benefits of the new improvements that LabKey is constantly doing? And two, how much testing we need to do in order to make sure that everything is working correctly. Because, again, everybody, we have close to 300 full staff employees. A lot of them, I'm guessing more than half of them are either animal care staff that will depend on LabKey to determine what they have to do in that day. So how do you maintain a system that is working 24/7? So again, the EHR system maintains animal treatments, observations, health information, and this information is entered and accessed any time of the day. So it's a real burden for us. The LabKey updates their system every 4 months. So there's not possible, like my team is rather small. So there's not a possibility that I can keep testing every single version of LabKey to stay up to the latest version of LabKey. So right now, I know that Oregon and Wisconsin, we're both running 17.2. So we're in the plan of, I know that Oregon's in plan of updating to 18.2. We are going to skip and go to 18.3 at some point later this year. So like, there's all these cool things that 7 or 5 different Primate centers are working on, plus LabKey making improvements to the core platform. How you consolidate all of that wonderfulness and make it sure that you don't break something. And that is kind of like the question that I have constantly, is like, determine how far behind your production server can be. Like, is it okay to be 1 year behind if it's working, if it's not broken? What is the benefits of being with the latest version of LabKey? And also, this, as was one of the topics for tomorrow, this is potentially going to change with changes on some of the technology platform that LabKey depends, specifically Java. So that will basically force us to be more aggressive at how much we do, how often we do upgrades. So that is more like an open question, that I'm trying to grapple around, because, before both Oregon and Wisconsin, before we updated to 17.2, which is already 1 year old, we were in 15.2 for a very long time. So we were very far behind of most of the people, I think, that are using LabKey here. So how do you basically keep up with all these updates while maintaining a stable system? So that is my presentation, and I will take any questions.